Borden's absence had stretched far too long, and Heartland hadn't felt whole without him. The ranch had, of course, found its rhythm, yet an unspoken emptiness lingered. Amy had poured her energy into keeping everything afloat, staying strong for her family and the horses, but beneath her composed exterior, she carried the heavy weight of his departure. Ty had been her confidant, the one person who truly understood the depths of her heart. Without him, the world felt colder, its paths harder to navigate. Years had passed since Ty left, and in that time, Amy had mended parts of her broken heart with the love for her daughter, Lindy, and the steadfast support of her close-knit family. But despite her best efforts, moments of acute longing for the man who had once been her entire world would surface. Ty had always been her rock, especially through challenging times. They had faced life's storms together, grown side by side, and built a life they believed could weather any adversity. But life, with its unpredictable nature, had dealt them a harsh blow with Ty's decision to leave. One of the most painful experiences Amy had ever endured. The ranch, however, had persevered. Lou had shouldered more responsibilities, Jack remained the unwavering anchor grounding the family, and both Caleb and Tim had stepped up, filling the voids where they could. Yet, there were days Amy felt a profound loneliness, a persistent ache reminding her of what was missing. She strived for positivity, focusing on daily routines, but no distraction could fully erase the sorrow. She often wondered if Ty would ever return to their family, to the life they had meticulously built, or if their chapter together was truly closed. As time marched on, Amy found herself at the threshold of a new things were subtly shifting around her. The dynamics at Heartland had evolved, and so had her own role within the family. A quiet understanding had begun to form with Nathan, who brought a warmth and empathy she hadn't realized she craved. The connection developing between them was gentle, yet the shadow of Ty's possible return always loomed. Still, a fragile sense of hope blossomed within Amy. Could Nathan be a new beginning? Was she finally ready to open her heart again? Yet, no matter how she tried to rationalize, the question echoed. What if Ty came back? What if he appeared, asking for a second chance, offering the life they once envisioned? Could she simply resume where they left off? Or had too much time and too much change created an unbridgeable chasm? Would she even want to? With each passing day, Amy couldn't shake an increasing premonition that something significant was about to occur. The ranch itself seemed to hold a quiet, charged energy, both serene and unsettled. There had been faint, unconfirmed whispers, a vague rumor that Ty might be thinking of returning, though nothing concrete, leaving her in a state of suspended uncertainty. Then the winds of change arrived with the force of an unexpected storm. The knock on the door was abrupt, out of the ordinary, yet disturbingly familiar. It wasn't a casual knock. Amy was in the barn, tending to Spartan, when she heard it, a knock that made her freeze, her heart lurching. Her mind raced, wondering who it could be. A neighbor, a deliverer. But a deep intuition told her this knock was different, pivotal. She didn't know why, but it felt like a moment that could alter everything. When she opened the door, there he stood, Ty Borden, in the flesh on her doorstep, as if no time had passed at all. For a long moment, Amy's eyes scanned his face, searching for traces of the man she had known. He looked the same, yet different. His eyes held a profound depth of emotion she hadn't anticipated, a mixture of regret, longing, and something else Ty. Amy's voice was a mere whisper, a fragile blend of disbelief and a surge of buried hope. "Hey, Amy," Ty said softly, his voice carrying a weight she hadn't expected. I know it's been a very long time." Amy could barely find her own voice. She stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding as a torrent of old emotions, memories of their shared past, the love they had nurtured, the trials they had overcome, flooded her mind. The pain of his absence, the confusion, and the joy that had once defined her life now seemed like a distant, poignant dream. Yet, there he was, right in front of her. They stood there, absorbing each other's presence, unsure of what to say, the gravity of their shared history hanging heavy between them. Amy yearned to ask 1,000 questions. Why had he left? Where had he been? Why now? But the words wouldn't. Instead, all she could do was look at him, trying to process the whirlwind of feelings inside her. Ty broke the silence, his voice laced with uncertainty. I didn't know where else to turn. I wasn't sure if I should come back. But I had to see you, Amy. Her breath caught. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the raw sincerity in his words. She wanted to reach out, to pull him into an embrace, to tell him everything she had felt, but the words remained trapped. She didn't know if she could trust him again, or even if she wanted to. The years apart had changed her profoundly. She wasn't sure she could simply revert to how things were. Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps approached from inside, and the rest of the family appeared. Jack, Lou, Caleb, even Tim, all freezing in their tracks as they registered Ty's presence. The silence was thick, broken only by the prairie wind, as they absorbed his sudden reappearance. It wasn't just Amy who was affected. This was their family. Their home, and Ty's return was an event none of them had truly prepared for. Despite the faint rumor, Jack was the first to break the charged silence, his voice steady but with an undeniable undercurrent of emotion. Well, look who the wind blew in. The tension in the air was almost tangible as everyone exchanged uncertain glances. There were no easy answers here, no quick resolution. Ty's return had plunged them all into a maelstrom of emotions, and no one was sure what would happen next. The reunion between Amy and Ty was nothing like either had envisioned. What might have been a moment of pure joy quickly morphed into a complex vortex of conflicting feelings. Ty had been gone for so long, and while his return brought a semblance of comfort and familiarity, it also reopened wounds that neither was fully prepared to confront. The history they shared remained a palpable entity between them, and navigating the strange mix of love, hurt, and profound uncertainty was a daunting task. Amy stood frozen as Ty stepped into the house, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The warmth of the familiar room did little to soothe the cold knot in her stomach. A part of her desperately wanted to rush into his arms, to make everything feel right again, but another, more cautious part hesitated. The space between them felt vast, an ocean carved by years of separation that had not just altered their relationship, but had fundamentally changed them as individuals. Ty had his reasons for leaving, reasons he had yet to fully explain, and Amy had done her best to move forward. She had Lindy, a family that depended on her, and a life that had, by necessity, continued without him. But the moment Ty walked back through that door, it all felt precariously close to unraveling. Ty, Amy finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you leave? After everything we built, how could you just disappear? Ty looked down, his eyes clouded with regret. I didn't know how to fix things, Amy. I thought I was doing what was best, but I was so wrong. I'm so sorry. The words hung in the air, heavy and insufficient. Amy had spent countless nights replaying this exact moment, wondering what he would say, how he would justify the choices that had shattered her world, and yet now that he was standing before her, the answers felt far from simple. It wasn't just about his departure, it was about the lost years, the irrevocable changes in her life, the strength she had been forced to find on her own. Could she truly go back? Or had too much time eroded the foundations they once Behind them, the family watched the emotional exchange unfold in tense silence. Jack's expression was stoic, but concern creased his eyes. Lou and Caleb exchanged worried glances, unsure how or if they should intervene. Even Tim, usually the first to voice his opinion, seemed at a loss for words. It was evident that Ty's return wasn't just a personal crisis for Amy. It was a seismic event for the entire family. They had all been affected by his absence, each in their own way, and now they had to process what his unexpected reappearance meant for their collective future. Caleb, who had been a steadfast presence in Amy's life after Ty's departure, felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had always been fiercely protective of Amy and Lindy. While he believed in second chances, he couldn't ignore the palpable tension that filled the room. Ty's return stirred something deep within him, a discomfort he couldn't quite place. Caleb had spent years supporting Amy through her darkest times, and now, with Ty back in the picture, His own place felt uncertain. Do you even realize what you did? Caleb finally spoke, his voice raw with contained emotion. You left. You left Amy. And you left this family to pick up the pieces. And now what? You think you can just walk back in, and everything will be okay? Amy's eyes widened slightly. She shot Caleb a quick imploring glance. But he continued, we've all moved on, Ty. We've all had to adapt to a life without you. Amy's not the same person she was when you left. She's stronger, and she has a family that's been here for her. Ty opened his mouth to respond, but Caleb pressed on, his voice softening slightly but losing none of its intensity. And what about Nathan? Amy's been seeing him. You can't just waltz back in and expect everything to be like it was. The room fell silent again. For the first time, Amy felt the weight of everyone's gaze, waiting for her to speak. She had spent years trying to move forward, to build a life for herself and Lindy, to let go of the past, and allow herself the possibility of a future with someone new. Now, with Ty standing before her, those carefully constructed defenses were crumbling. It wasn't just the shock of his return, it was the stark realization that nothing could ever be the same. Ty's face softened, his eyes pleading with Amy's. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. I never wanted to leave you like that. But I was lost, Amy. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us. Amy's heart ached as she listened. A part of her wanted to believe him, to forgive him, to release all the hurt that had accumulated over the years. But another part, the part that had learned to survive his absence, knew it wasn't that simple. She had changed. He had changed. The years apart had created a rift that words alone couldn't bridge. The love they once shared was still there, a faint flickering ember, but it was entangled with pain and uncertainty. I don't know what to say, Ty, Amy finally admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know how to go back to where we were. I can't just forget everything that's happened. Ty nodded, a look of profound understanding in his eyes. I know, I don't expect you to, but I need to try, Amy. I need to find a way back to you, to this family. I want to make things right. The tension in the room remained thick, yet a tiny glimmer of hope emerged, a fragile spark suggesting that perhaps Ty's return wasn't an ending, but the difficult beginning of something new. Amy, however, wasn't ready to make that leap of faith just yet. There was too much to process, too much pain to unravel. For now, all she could do was take one hesitant step at a time, trying to determine what role, if any, Ty could play in her life moving forward, and whether she could ever truly let go of the past enough to let him back. The return of Ty Borden had done more than just stir old feelings for Amy. It had sent ripples of consequence throughout the entire Heartland family. The palpable tension in the air was a testament to the shift that had occurred in their lives. Ty's absence had left a void, and though they had all endeavored to move on, it was clear that his return brought with it a complex mixture of hope and trepidation. Jack, who had always been the steadfast foundation of the family, found himself grappling with a mix of relief and apprehension. He had spent years striving to hold everything together, to keep the Heartland ranch running smoothly, and now, with Ty back, he wasn't sure what the future held. Jack had always cared for Ty like a son, and a part of him had never truly relinquished the hope that Ty might one day return. But now that the moment was here, Jack couldn't help but wonder if things could ever truly be the same. You're back, Jack finally said, his voice gruff yet softened by an undeniable warmth in his eyes that betrayed the emotional walls he had carefully constructed. But things have changed. You can't just pick up where you left off. Ty nodded, accepting the weight of Jack's words. Jack studied him for a moment, before nodding slowly. Just don't expect everyone to forget the past, Ty. It's going to take time for everyone to adjust. You've got to prove yourself, much like the rest of us have had to prove ourselves over the years. For Jack, Ty's return wasn't just about the past. It was about the future of the ranch, the future of the family. He had witnessed so many changes over the years, and he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The bond Ty once shared with the land, with the animals, and with the family wasn't something that could be instantly reclaimed with a simple apology. It would require time, effort, and unwavering patience. But Jack also knew that family was worth fighting for, and if Ty was willing to put in the work, Jack would give him that chance. Lou, ever the pragmatist, found herself struggling with the new dynamics Ty's return had introduced. She had always been fiercely protective of her family, and with Amy and the children at the center of it all, Lou felt an immense responsibility to ensure no one got hurt. Ty's sudden reappearance felt like an approaching storm, and she wasn't sure how to prepare for the inevitable fallout. "Are you sure about this, Amy?" Lou asked quietly, her voice laced with concern. "I know it's hard to even think about, but bringing Ty back into our lives isn't just about you and him. It affects everyone. It affects Lindy." Amy turned to her sister, her face a mask of conflicting emotion. "I don't know, Lou. I want to believe that Ty can change, that things can go back to the way they were, but I don't know if that's even possible anymore. I don't know if I can just forget all the years we lost." Lou sighed, placing a comforting hand on her sister's shoulder. "I get it. I really do. But you can't go through this alone. You've already got so much on your plate with Lindy, with the ranch, and now this. Just be careful, okay? And remember, whatever happens, we're right here for." The words were comforting, but they also served as a stark reminder of the immense weight Amy was carrying. She had always been the heart of Heartland, the one who held the family together through all their ups and downs. But now, with Ty back in the picture, she felt that responsibility more acutely than ever. She didn't just have to navigate her own complex emotions for Ty. She had to consider the impact on her daughter, on her own future, and on the family that had supported her through all these years. Meanwhile, Caleb found himself caught in a whirlwind of his own emotions. He had been a constant in Amy's life, and he had come to care for her deeply. When Ty left, Caleb had stepped in as a friend, a companion, and even a surrogate father figure to Lynn. He had done everything he could to help Amy through the hardest years of her life, and now, with Ty's return, Caleb felt as if the ground beneath him was shifting. "You don't just get to walk back in and pretend like nothing happened," Caleb muttered, his voice low and filled with frustration, mostly to himself but loud enough for Ty to potentially overhear if he was close. "You left her. You left her, and now you think you can just show up, and everything will be fine." Amy overheard the undercurrent of his exchange, her heart aching for both men. She understood Caleb's frustration. After all, he had been there for her in ways Ty hadn't been for a long time. But she also knew, or hoped, that Ty had his reasons, even if those reasons were hard to accept. "Caleb, I get it," Amy said softly, stepping subtly between where the two men might stand. "But you need to understand, this isn't just about you or Ty. This is about me, about us as a family, and about figuring out what's best for Lindy." Caleb looked away, the anger in his eyes slowly giving way to a more resigned expression. He knew Amy was right, but it didn't make the situation any easier. As much as he cared for Amy and Lindy, he also couldn't ignore the fact that Ty's return threatened the stability that had been painstakingly built in his absence. He had no idea where he stood in this new complicated dynamic. Throughout all of this, Tim, who had always been vocal about his opinions, remained largely silent, observing. He had his own history with Ty, one that was peppered with tension and unresolved issues. As much as he wanted to be the one to step in and protect his family, Tim knew that Ty's return was something that couldn't be rushed. It would take time, and it would require more patience than he had often been willing to give in the past. But for Amy's sake, he was willing to try. After all, family was family, and ultimately, that was what mattered most. Ty's return had changed everything. Not just for Amy but for the entire Heartland family. It had reopened old wounds, reignited past conflicts, and forced everyone to confront things they had been avoiding for years. But at the same time, it had also brought a fragile hope, a reminder that sometimes even the most fractured relationships could be mended with time, effort, and love. The road ahead would undoubtedly be difficult, but one thing was certain. Nothing at Heartland would ever be quite the same again. As the dust began to settle from Ty Borden's unexpected return, it became increasingly clear that the future of Heartland was teetering on a precipice. The weight of the changes was palpable, And the family members, each grappling with their own struggles and hopes, started to comprehend that the road ahead would not be easy. Ty's return wasn't just about a potential reunion with Amy. It was about reconciling with a painful past, navigating a complicated present, and somehow finding a way forward in a world that had inevitably moved on without him. Ty had once been an integral part of Heartland, a force that had helped anchor the family and the ranch. But over the long years of his absence, things had shifted. Amy had blossomed into a strong, independent woman and mother, while the rest of the family had adapted to a new reality without Ty's daily presence. His return didn't simply pick up where things had left off. It opened the door to new questions, fresh challenges, and a new dynamic that no one was fully prepared for. Amy was the first to admit that she was profoundly unsure of what to expect. In many ways, Ty's absence had forced her to mature quickly. She had become a mother, a dedicated rancher, and the emotional core of Heartland, all while navigating the deep grief of losing Ty and raising their daughter Lindy, largely on her own. Now, with Ty's return, Amy found herself at a daunting crossroads. Her heart ached for the man she had once loved so completely, the man who had shaped her world in ways she could never forget. But she also knew that too much time had passed, and things had changed in ways they couldn't simply undo. The emotional tug-of-war inside Amy was intense. Part of her desperately wanted to believe that things could go back to the way they were, that their family could heal the wounds of the past and rebuild the life they had once cherished. But another, more pragmatic part of her feared that Ty's return would only complicate matters further. She had fought so hard to build a life without him, to forge a future for herself and Lindy, and the thought of returning to a place where those old dreams might resurface was both deeply comforting and utterly terrifying. For Ty, the journey back was equally complex. He had spent years away trying to figure out who he was, what he truly wanted, and how he could become the man he had always aspired to be. He knew that his absence had left deep scars on Amy and the family, and he wasn't sure if he could ever fully repair the damage. But coming back to Heartland wasn't just about making amends. It was about finding a measure of peace within himself. Ty knew he had made profound mistakes in the past, mistakes that had cost him more than he could have ever imagined. But now, with the chance to return home, he was fiercely determined to prove that he could be the person that Amy and his family deserved. The tension between the possibility of rekindling old flames and the undeniable need to move forward was something that lingered heavily in the Heartland air. Would Amy be able to forgive Ty for leaving? Could they rebuild their connection and make it stronger than it had been before? And what about the rest of the family? Would they be able to truly accept Ty back into their lives after so much time had passed? These were questions with no easy answers, but they were the questions that would undoubtedly shape the future of Heartland. For Caleb, the uncertainty of Ty's return had a more immediate and personal impact. He had come to care deeply for Amy and Lindy over the years, and he had carved out a significant place for himself within the family. Now, with Ty's reappearance, Caleb found himself questioning where he stood. He had always been a steady, reliable presence for Amy, but with Ty back in the picture, Caleb knew that things could never quite be the same. His feelings for Amy were complicated. He cared for her immensely, but he also recognized that the unique bond she had shared with Ty was something that couldn't be easily replaced or ignored. Caleb's struggle was not just with his own emotions, but with the shifting dynamics of the family as a whole. He didn't want to stand in the